Just a heads up, I'm not going to be using visuals, this is just a little rant. So I came across a typical example of game dropping today, just adding Gamergate to something to get attention. The article was called, Gamergate Fail, The Rise of CG Women. So this guy's point is obviously to say, oh look, these misogynists are upset there are more female characters. But that doesn't make any sense. More female characters is a massive victory for misogyny. More women to control. A misogynist would surely be very happy about this news, just like the author of this article is. A coincidence, I'm sure. And this led me to think about video game feminism, which never made any sense to me. Overall, with regards to representation at least, I see them say that gaming as a whole tends to pander too much to straight male sexuality, and that more diverse women need to be represented in gaming. I believe that their first point is incorrect, and that their second point, their aim to increase diversity of women in gaming, will cause the first point to become true. I'm going to lay out a hypothetical to explain this, but first I'll just point something out. I did some research. I looked up sites that were celebrating diversity at E3. I found the Mary Sue, and they provided 23 examples of games with, strong kick-ass women. 21 of the 23 I'd say are eminently fuckable. As in, if you wanted to pull a feminist frequency and show how games pander to males, you could use any of them as an example. You would be just as dumb as the sincere videos, but I'm sure just as many people would go along with it. So now, time to set up my hypothetical. You see these people campaigning for diversity, and they'll say, yeah, there are so-and-so women in this game, but that doesn't reflect gaming as a whole. We are not represented in gaming as a whole or the mainstream. And then when it comes down to saying that gaming as a whole, panders to straight male sexuality, they pick a couple examples of women with big tits. And somehow, strangely, while a handful is not enough to show them that there's representation, a handful is enough to say that games overall pander to straight male sexuality. MRAs, who I have to admit I don't know a lot about, tend to be called the antithesis of these people. They tend to be called the opposition to them. They're not though. I haven't actually seen their reverse. I've seen people say, that's not a problem. I guess they do count as opposition, but not in the way I'm thinking of, not the reverse of them. I have not seen any pandering to straight male sexuality activists. These advocates would take the same handful of allegedly hypersexualized women that the women representation advocates would, and they'd use that to say, look at these token attempts to pander to straight male sexuality. It's something, but it doesn't show that gaming as a whole panders to straight male sexuality, and that's a problem. And what's more, the other handful of gaming examples I talked about, the good examples of female characters in the eyes of women representation advocates, a problem they may have with them is to say, you cannot restrict representation of women to just a handful of games. It's not something you do in one game, it's something that's done across the gaming industry, and there's no way to just represent women. You need that variety. Which is exactly what I think a pandering to straight male sexuality advocate would say about the handful of allegedly hypersexualized women. They would say, you cannot restrict pandering to straight male sexuality to a few examples. It needs to be across the spectrum, and it needs to recognize the nuance and differences in pandering to straight male sexuality. We all have different tastes. In fact, if you look at straight male sexuality as a whole, the things that appeal to it are about as diverse as women as a whole. A true straight male sexuality pandering advocate would want the minority tastes to be accounted for in gaming as a whole, just as a women representation advocate would want minority women to be represented. So let's try to look through the eyes of this person who believes gaming as a whole must pander to straight male sexuality. Let's think what they'd have to do. Straight men like women. In order to make sure all of these tastes are catered for and just done for the benefit of straight male sexuality pandering, how would I make gaming as a whole pander to all of these tastes, all of these people who prefer different varieties of women? I'd increase diversity of representation of women in gaming. The sexual taste of men who like big-titted women with, boob plates, like little skimpy bits of armor and clothing, they've been catered to for too long. The rest of us perverts need representation of our tastes. And we're getting it. The CFNM guys, the guys who like clothed female nude male, well, they play all of these new games where the women are fully clothed and they just strip off. Boom, they've got their fetish. People like minority representation, right? Why not minority representation of pandering to straight male sexuality? Do you think a cartoon Anita Sarkeesian would be really hot? You're in a very small minority, but you've got it in Towerfall. Into sporty Asian chicks? Mirror's Edge. Do you have a taste for lesbians of questionable legality? Gone Home is the game for you, my creepy friend. Into physically powerful women, but you want them a bit cartoony while still being able to see exactly what they look like. I think you'll have a lot of fun when Overwatch comes out and you can play as Zarya? Are you into strong women, but you prefer to imagine how they look? The Scythian from Sword and Sorcery will have you rubbing your dick raw. What's quite amazing is how past characters can appeal to new varieties of straight male sexuality. Are you what some people may call a gamergator? Do you distrust the press and maybe even the government? Jade from Beyond Good and Evil might just make you come in your pants. You see, I don't understand why we can't all get along. What feminists in gaming want is exactly the same as what misogynists want. But, as usual, that's just another one of my harmful opinions.